Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, if you've watched this channel for a while, you know that one of the things that I've been saying that I believe is going to happen is that we're heading into a global depression, a depression as bad as the Great Depression, but not as long as the Great Depression, because of the reaction from governments around the world will be simply to print currency and to bail out every individual, every business possible to prevent that depression from taking hold the way the Great Depression did. But I believe that we're heading there. We see conditions continuing to deteriorate, and the signs on the ground are that that is exactly what we are seeing, is this depression take hold. Now, in spite of what many of us see with inflation, we are actually in a period of deflation right now. Now, keep in mind, that's an economic term. It means a contracting currency supply. It does not mean that prices are decreasing, because obviously any of us that go to the store know that the prices we're paying at the register for groceries, for utilities, for anything has been going up. But deflation is an economic term. It means this contraction in the money supply, and it is not a good thing over the long. But in most cases, we see the Great Depression. That's exactly what we saw, was this deflationary spiral. So what do we see right now? Well, we see this is from Zero Hedge. It says, credit crunch, the money supply has shrunk for 8 months in a row. It says money supply growth fell again in June, remaining deep in negative territory after turning negative in November 2022 for the first time in 28 years. June's drop continues a steep downward trend from the unprecedented highs experienced during much of the past 2 years. It says since April 2021, money supply growth has slowed quickly. It says money supply growth has now been negative for 8 months. During June 2023, the downturn continued as year-over-year growth in the money supply was at negative 12.4%. That's up slightly from May's rate of negative 13.1% and was far below June 2022's rate of 5.7% growth in the currency supply. It says with negative growth now falling near or below negative 10% for the third month in a row, currency supply contraction is the largest we've seen since the Great Depression. Prior to March through June of this year, at no other point for at least 60 years has the money supply fallen by more than 6% year over year in any month. So in over 60 years, we haven't seen a decline of greater than 6% in any month. Now we've seen 3 consecutive months of double-digit contraction. Let's look at this tweet right here from Larry Lepard. Here he has this chart. He says, the Fed better pivot or the economy gets a gunshot in the face. And I think we've talked about before, it doesn't matter what the Fed does. The outcome is going to be bad in the end economically, because if they completely pivot, then we go into a hyperinflationary scenario. They have to hold these rates until something breaks. Ultimately, I think we're headed toward that hyperinflation, but not anytime soon on the other side of this global depression. So let's take a look at this chart right here. Let me enlarge it a little bit. And he shows what has happened when the currency supply, as measured as M2, has contracted. So we had, back in the 19th century, a couple of occasions that led to depressions. We had a very short depression following World War I and the Spanish flu outbreak that a lot of people have forgotten. Lasted about a year. And then we have the Great Depression down here, We have some blips, a couple of flirtations with going below the line, but here's where we are right now. Now look at this. You see this huge spike up here. This is all the currency creation that took place during the pandemic. Paying people, just randomly sending checks to people, student loan deferments. Oh, you don't have to pay your rent. You don't have to pay your mortgage. That leads to this massive currency creation, and of course inflation of prices was the result of that. Now, are we going to see prices come down as a result of this? I don't believe that we will, especially with some of the things we see with food supply. It depends on that. But what we will see is we will see this massive increase in inflation stop. We won't continue to see these massive double-digit increases in prices we pay as a result of this contracting money supply. But keep in mind what that means is, we're heading into this depression scenario. So on the other side of that, I believe we will see massive inflation as they continue. They do the exact same thing they did during the pandemic. It's that this is going to go like way, way, way higher than anything we've ever seen as they start to give people grocery stimulus checks and rent stimulus checks, and they'll send cash out to as many people as possible to try to avoid a repeat of the Great Depression. But guys, make no doubt, we're heading into that depression. We're starting to see the signs of stress from this already. We see this in trucker news that says freight volume and spending declined markedly in the second quarter. It says truck freight volume and spending in the second quarter of 2023 declined by the highest level since the early days of the pandemic. The latest U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index revealed spending by shippers dropped 10.9% compared to the second quarter of 2022, while shipment volume dropped 9%. So that means 9% less things being shipped. That's a result of people buying less. People don't have the purchasing power to be able to buy the things they once did because of this rise in prices. The consumer credit is being tapped out. People are being stretched so thin, they're having to cut back. So we're seeing that decline show up in shipping volumes. We're also seeing stories like this. It says credit card and car loan delinquencies pass pre-COVID levels as consumers get squeezed. So here we read more Americans are failing to make payments on their credit cards and auto loans, another sign of rising financial pressure on consumers. New credit card and auto loan delinquencies have now surpassed pre-COVID levels, according to a Wednesday report issued by Moody's. Now, we've seen credit card debt increase to over $1 trillion for the first time in history. And all the while, we're seeing 20% plus interest rates on that credit card debt, which we haven't seen in a long, long time. You have to go back, I think, 20 years or more to be able to see those levels of interest rates. And then we're seeing the auto loan delinquencies show up. We noted in the past not defaults, but the delinquencies, I believe, were as high as they had been at the height of the global financial crisis in spring of 2009. We're seeing these signs of stress show up among consumers. We see more of that here. We see Americans are pulling money out of their 401ks at an alarming rate. It says more Americans are tapping their 401k accounts because of financial distress, according to Bank of America data released Tuesday. The number of people who made a hardship withdrawal during the second quarter increased 36% from the second quarter 2022. It's a pretty troubling development if more people are resorting to making hardship withdrawals, Matt Schultz, chief credit analyst at LendingTree, told CNN. You understand why people do that in the heat of the moment, but the opportunity cost on that are really, really high over time, he said. So for people to be able to tap their 401ks for these hardship withdrawals, that's a true hardship because you have to pay a penalty on that. Even if you pay that loan back, if you take a loan against that and pay that back, you have to pay it with interest. It's generally advisable not to do that, to not mess with the money in your 401k until you're of retirement age, because hey, you can't just magically put that money back in most cases. Most people don't once they withdraw it out. Now they don't have those funds for retirement. What we're seeing is that people are in a position where they really have no choice, and they're doing this just to get by. And of course, now we're seeing a resumption of student loan payments. So as you know, during the pandemic, student loans payments were deferred for almost 3 years. I think a little over 3 years, actually, 40 months, I think it came to. But that's going to change soon. Here we read federal student loan borrowers are struggling to make ends meet before payments resume in October. It says more than 45% of federal student loan borrowers expect to go delinquent on their student loan payments once forbearance ends. Even though they have not been making student loan payments, 53% of federal student loan borrowers say they're struggling to pay other bills, such as auto loans, mortgage, credit cards. Again, we talked about these auto delinquencies. A large percentage of car loans, auto loans now are over $1,000 a month. And in many cases, this isn't just people making bad choices. There is a lot of that going on, but we've seen this massive rise in the cost of used cars, new cars. And what happens if the car you're driving just conks out, or you get in an accident and it's totaled and you have to get a new car in this environment? Well, you end up paying a lot more for it than you otherwise would have paid just 3 or 4 years ago. But what stands out in this article right here, we go down through the survey that they're doing, and it says more than half of federal student loan borrowers, 56%, including 57% of those who provide financial support to family, say they will need to choose between making their student loan payments or paying for necessities such as rent, bills, and groceries, as they cannot afford both. So guys, all the stress we've been seeing among consumers and the shipping down 9% year over year, that's going to get worse as people who have had their student loan payments deferred, they're now having to make those payments once again. I think the average amount is about $400 per month. And there's 15 million of these borrowers. So that's a large amount of this disposable income that isn't going to be going into other things, eating out, buying things at the retail level. It will now have to go to student loan debt. And remember, that is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So this is going to have to be made. I don't know how that gets done if people are having to, if more than half are having to choose between the basic necessities of life and making these student loan payments. Where does that leave the economy as these resume, which is, we're right around the corner from that. It says in October, most of these payments, first payments, will be due. That's just 6-7 weeks away. It's not far away. And of course, it's not just consumers suffering. Here we read, commercial real estate gets messier. Office commercial mortgage-backed securities delinquency rates spiked the fastest ever. Bank-held office mortgages also hit. So Guys, we all know the story of how office space, commercial office space is struggling post-pandemic. A lot of the workers that left the urban core, left these offices, of course, some of them have come back, but it's nowhere near the 100% of what it was 3.5, 4 years ago. It's something like 56%. So you have a lot of vacant office space. Then you have people who aren't spending in that area, in that urban core. So the local restaurants, caterers that cater to office business meetings, all of these other businesses that existed to serve that community are also suffering. But we're seeing defaults on these large office buildings as they don't have 30-year fixed mortgages the way a home might. They have 5-year adjustable rate mortgages. I think something like 89% of commercial real estate is on an adjustable rate mortgage, which is, and so I'm sorry, I take that back. Interest-only payments. So an interest-only loan, 89% are interest-only loans, and the average term is 5 years. So a lot of these are going to be coming up for renewal at much higher rates. And the cash flows have declined significantly as the tenants aren't there the way they were 4 years ago, to the point where we're going to see massive defaults in the commercial real estate space. We've already started to see them, but as this gets worse, it's going to hit the banking sector. And already we're seeing the banks curtail their lending because they're facing this wave of defaults, and they don't want to, they're being very particular in who they loan to make sure that the collateral is there so that they don't get burned by any new loans. So let's read on a little bit about this. This says, the delinquency rate of commercial real estate mortgages on office properties that have been securitized into commercial mortgage-backed securities. Remember, what did we hear during the Great Financial Crisis? It was the same thing, but it was with residential housing. We had these mortgage-backed securities, so you take everybody's mortgage and you roll them up, all these subprime borrowers. It may be a big credit risk to lend to one, but if we put 1,000 together into one little security and we sell that, well, then somehow the risk goes away because we put 1,000 subprime borrowers together instead of just one. I mean, granted, that's diversifying among 1,000 people, but it's not doing anything to negate the risk, and we saw what happened as a result. Now we're talking about commercial real estate and commercial mortgage-backed securities. It says spiked to 5% by loan balance in July, up from a delinquency rate of 2.8% in April, having now spiked by 2.2 percentage points in 3 months. By far the biggest 3-month spike in data going back to 2000, and by 3.4 percentage points so far this year, by far the biggest 7-month spike. This office mortgage default cycle is outrunning the cycle during the financial crisis with ease, and it just started. The cycle during the financial crisis, as horrible as it was, started more slowly and proceeded more slowly than this cycle. It eventually topped out 4 years later with a delinquency rate of over 10% in 2012 and 2013. We're almost halfway there in 7 months on mortgages that were mostly written in 2014 and later. So we're seeing as these mortgages have to roll over at much higher rates, we're going to see this delinquency rate rise. It's going to be massive. And guys, keep in mind, all of this stems back from what we pointed out late last year and well into this year, that the percentage increase in the Fed funds rate was absolutely unprecedented. it was almost a straight vertical line upward, and we said, this is going to crash. This is going to break a lot of things. And we're seeing that in the commercial real estate space as these higher rates. The borrowers can't afford to pay that. The income stream from the properties doesn't justify the price they're paying. And so at the higher rate, even if the rate was the same, the whole landscape is completely changed. I think we would still be seeing this, but we're seeing this on a much bigger scale because those rates are going to be higher. And guys, make no doubt, we're going to see it in the corporate world as well, because next year, so I believe it's 2023. So for 2023, I think $800 billion in corporate debt has to be rolled over at the new rates. And starting next year, 2024, for 3 straight years, over $1 trillion in corporate debt has to be rolled over at these new higher rates. What is that going to do to business activity? What is that going to do to hiring? What is that going to mean in terms of layoffs? And keep in mind, a lot of people have estimated somewhere near 20% of the publicly traded companies in the United States are zombie companies, meaning that's a term that means that they're basically living off of this low interest debt, and their business operations, all they're capable of doing is generating the cash flow to pay for the interest on the debt they owe. They're not paying off any of that principal. As the rates go higher, they will be unable to meet those payments. They will go into default and they will go bankrupt. So this is a holdover from 15 years ago when many of these companies should have gone bankrupt, but they didn't. And they've been holding on by rolling over their debt at these low interest rates. And now, as those interest rates have to be rolled over at these loans have to be rolled over at a much higher interest rates, we're going to see those companies go under and take a lot of employees with them. I think we've already seen something similar to that with Yellow, the big trucking company. Been around for 100 years, but this is an environment that they can't operate profitably in. And we're going to see that with a lot of companies. Guys, it's not, well, I've been focusing on the United States here, but it's not just the United States. This is a global issue. We see here in the Sun, over in the UK, it says mortgage hell as 1 million households face paying an extra £500 a month, Bank of England warns. So we have this rollover in debt, and here they have by 2023, by 2026, the number of people, mortgages that are going to have to be rolled over at higher rates, and the cost, almost £200 per month, up to 500 or 500 or more, over 1 million mortgages by 2026 at these higher rates would be the borrowers are going to get stuck with bills of £500 or more per month than what they're paying now. How is that not going to have a massive impact on the economy? And it says here, the bank rate has risen rapidly from 0.1% in December 2021. So guys, that's not even 2 years ago, to a 15-year high of 5%. Most home loan households are on fixed rates, but will feel the shock when their deals are up for renewal. So a lot of, I don't think, correct me if you're in the UK, leave your comments below. But in the UK, unlike the United States, I don't think a 30-year fixed mortgage is even an option. I think you can get a fixed rate mortgage for 5 years, maybe 10 years, I'm not sure. But it's not for 30 years. It's not for the life of the loan. And so every once in a while, you have to refinance at whatever the going rate is. And those rates are significantly higher than they were before. And again, it's not just the UK. We have here this Zero Hedge article about China facing a bigger debt crisis than Evergrande in under 30 days. If you remember 2 years ago, there was a massive default by this real estate company Evergrande. They defaulted on billions of dollars, and many people thought that would create this cascading financial crisis at the time. That didn't come to fruition, but now they have another group that's also looking to default on $199 billion in debt. So this is what you see in a deflationary collapse, guys, is when, and again, we're seeing that contracting currency supply that tells us that's what we're in right now. You would see these defaults. You're going to see companies unable to meet their debt obligations, declaring bankruptcy, and then that blows a hole in the balance sheet of the bank or the financial entity that lent them that currency to begin with. This is what we saw in 2008, 2009. And this can get out of hand rather quickly. So we'll be keeping our eyes on this situation because remember, while the mainstream media don't want to talk about it, they brushed it under the rug, act like it didn't even happen. We saw the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures in U.S. history in March through May of this year. And they came up with this temporary Band-Aid program to sort of cover that up, sweep it under the rug. But the banks are still facing the same massive structural problems they faced in the spring right now. And things are getting worse as we see the commercial real estate, these loans default, as we see consumers cut back to pay for student loan payments or to cut back in general because they're barely hanging on, buying the basic necessities of life, and they can't spend at the retail level the way they used to. So we're going to start seeing more and more businesses go under. And of course, that's going to cause unemployment, which is going to make the crisis worse as those people are unable to meet their debt obligations. We're also going to see the stock market likely crash as a result of that. So we're going to see that's when most people wake up to these events, is when you see the stock market crash and you see the unemployment spike, just like we saw in late 2008, early 2009. Many people forget going into in the summer of that year, about the time of the year we're at right now, people said, oh, everything's fine. You know, and then very quickly everything wasn't fine. I remember July 4th that year going to put gasoline in the car, and it was over $4 a gallon, maybe almost $5 a gallon, which would be like $10 a gallon today with the inflation we've seen. Excuse me. And then in Thanksgiving that year, so in late November, I filled up for $1.10, I think it was, a gallon. So that quickly, in a matter of 4 months' time, we saw the price of gasoline drop 70% or more from where it had been because of the slowdown in the global economy. That's how quickly everybody woke up to the problems that had already been present. They had already been festering, but most people chose to ignore those problems, or they thought it's no big deal. And yet it turned out to be a big deal. And I think we're in a similar situation today. I think this could go south very quickly. And I think these student loan repayments, this is a big deal because that's a large amount of cash that's going to be taken out of. It's like a reverse stimulus. And we're going to see when that spending goes away, that's going to impact a lot of businesses. So guys, prepare. We've talked about some preparation in the past. I'll do a video soon because I know there's a lot of new listeners on the channel, but we need to be preparing for this, and we need to be focused on this from a Bible prophecy standpoint, because economic turmoil and chaos creates conditions of social unrest, because remember, this will be on a global scale, that often gives rise to demagogues and dictators. So we could see a lot change in the world. And I still think ground zero for all of this, because of the energy situation, will be Europe. And based on Daniel chapter 9, I believe the Antichrist will come out of Europe. So could we see the rise of the Antichrist in the near future because of these economic conditions? Who knows? But guys, make no doubt, we are heading into perilous times economically. Again, we're going to see, I believe, a deflationary collapse, a global depression, maybe 18 months long, and then the response from the politicians, from the governments, is going to be to print currency, hand it out to everybody they can to try to alleviate that distress. But in doing so, that will cause hyperinflation, make the situation even worse. And that's when we may see a lot of these things roll out, like central bank digital currency. Time will tell. We'll see if that plays out. But guys, make no doubt about it. Right now, conditions do not look good on the ground. I don't know what you're seeing. Let me know in the comments below. What do you see going on? Are people having trouble paying their bills? Are you seeing these types of conditions take hold where you live? So let me know in the comments below. And in this video, my voice is giving out. I'm almost better, but I'm still not quite there. But leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And God willing, I will see you on Wednesday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.